The exact moment physics took its revenge on Patricia, Patty Caldwell is a sound I will carry to my grave. A thud so heavy and final that it felt less like a foot hitting plastic and more like a gavel striking a sounding block, signaling the end of a 6-month reign of terror that had turned my sanctuary into a prison. It was 6:47 a.m. on a crisp Tuesday in Asheville, North Carolina, and the fog was just lifting off the Blue Ridge Mountains, revealing the manicured lawns of Oakwood Enclave, a place that sells itself on tranquility but runs on the kind of toxic, petty tyranny that only exists where people have too much time and not enough soul. My name is Elias Vance, and 3 years ago, I was just a man trying to keep his head above water, a carpenter with calloused hands and a heart that had been hollowed out by the 2-year war my wife, Elena, fought against ovarian cancer, a battle that we lost in slow motion, watching the person I loved most fade away while the medical bills piled up like snowdrifts against the door of our old life. When the dust finally settled, when the insurance companies had taken their pound of flesh and the bankruptcy courts at the Buncombe County Courthouse had stripped us down to the bone, I had just enough left to put a down payment on a modest ranch house in Oakwood Enclave, a quiet subdivision where I thought my 16-year-old daughter, Maya, could finish high school without seeing her father flinch every time the mailman brought another collection notice. For a few weeks, it was perfect. I would sit on my back deck with a mug of black coffee, smelling the pine and the wet earth, listening to the world wake up, and for the first time since Elena's diagnosis, I felt like I could breathe, like the weight of the world wasn't crushing my chest. But I didn't know that peace in suburbia comes with a price tag, and the tax collector was a woman named Patty Caldwell. Imagine the human embodiment of a migraine, a woman who treats the neighborhood covenants like religious scripture and views herself as the high priestess, usually dressed in pristine white tennis skirts that have never seen a court and driving a silver Mercedes SUV that cost more than the total of my last 5 years of income. Patty wasn't just the HOA president. She was a warlord and a visor, a woman who had inherited her money and assumed it bought her the right to decide who was worthy of breathing the same air as her. And unfortunately for me, a widowed carpenter driving a dented Ford F-150 with a ladder rack didn't fit her aesthetic of the perfect neighborhood. It started subtly, the way these things always do, with the trash cans, because for people like Patty, control is exerted in the smallest, most humiliating ways possible. In Oakwood Enclave, trash pickup is Tuesday morning. So like clockwork, like every other hardworking person who just wants to follow the rules, I would roll my regulation bin to the curb on Monday night, oblivious to the fact that I had already been marked as a target. The first time it happened, I came home from a framing job to find garbage strewn across my driveway, eggshells and coffee grounds baking in the afternoon sun, the bin lying on its side like a dead animal, and I assumed it was the wind, or maybe a raccoon, or perhaps the sanitation arm of the truck had just slipped. I cleaned it up, washed the driveway, and moved on, because when you've watched your wife die in a hospital bed, spilled trash doesn't register as a tragedy, it's just a nuisance. But then it happened the next week, and the week after that, and the week after that, a pattern emerging from the chaos, a weekly ritual of humiliation where I would return to find my refuse displayed for the neighborhood to see, a silent signal that I was messy, that I was dirty, that I didn't belong. I started looking at the other driveways, noticing that the bins belonging to the doctors and the lawyers and the retirees remained upright and dignified, while mine was the only one consistently desecrated. Suspicion is a heavy thing to carry, so one Tuesday morning, instead of leaving early for the job site, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, watching through the blinds like a sniper, waiting for the wind or the raccoon to reveal itself. At 6:45 a.m., she appeared, Patty Caldwell, power walking with an aggressive, rhythmic stride, wearing noise-canceling headphones and a look of supreme self-importance. She walked past the Smith's house, past the Johnsons, and when she reached my driveway, she didn't even break stride. She just shifted her weight, checked her surroundings with a quick, predatory glance, and delivered a sharp, practiced hip check to my trash can, knocking it into the street with a clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the morning quiet, before continuing on her way, a smirk playing on her lips. I was being targeted, specifically and maliciously, by a woman who knew nothing about me other than the fact that my truck was old and my hands were rough. In 2025, when you're dealing with a tyrant, You don't confront them in the street where it's your word against theirs. You arm yourself with digital eyes. So I went to the hardware store and bought a high-definition doorbell camera, installing it that afternoon with the grim satisfaction of a man setting a trap. The next Tuesday, the camera caught it all in beautiful 1080p resolution, Patty marching into the frame, the look of disdain as she saw my house, the deliberate check for witnesses, and then the kick, violent and unnecessary, sending my property tumbling. I thought I had her. I thought evidence meant something, but I had underestimated the depth of her pettiness, because 3 days after I installed the camera, I didn't get an apology. I got a violation notice from the Oakwood Enclave Homeowners Association, signed by Patty herself, citing me for unauthorized surveillance equipment, creating a hostile community atmosphere, and demanding the immediate removal of the device or facing fines starting at $100 a day. I knew my rights. Elena's cousin was a property lawyer in Charlotte, and he had told me years ago that you can film anything visible from your own property. So I ignored the letter, knowing that a bully hates nothing more than being ignored. But Patty didn't like being ignored. She escalated, launching a counter-surveillance operation that bordered on obsession. She started walking my property line with a tape measure and a clipboard, documenting blades of grass that were a fraction of an inch too high, taking photos of Maya's bicycle if it was left on the porch for more than an hour, timing how long my work truck was parked in the driveway. It was psychological warfare, plain and simple, a campaign designed to make me feel watched, to make me feel unwelcome, to force the poor neighbor out before he could lower the property values. She called a community meeting at the Oakwood Community Center, a drab building that smelled of floor wax and judgment, ostensibly to discuss safety concerns, but really to put me on trial. I sat there, listening to her tell 12 sleepy neighbors that certain new elements were bringing an atmosphere of intimidation to the enclave, painting me as a paranoid creep spying on children, her voice dripping with fake concern, until I couldn't take it anymore, and I stood up, opening my laptop to play the montage I had edited together. 47 seconds of Patty Caldwell vandalism, loop after loop of her kicking my can, displayed on a projector screen for the board members, an elderly couple named Mr. and Mrs. Gable, and a terrified young mom named Jessica, to see. Mrs. Caldwell, I said, my voice shaking with rage I was trying to suppress. I installed the camera because someone keeps vandalizing my property, and now we all know who. The room went silent, the kind of silence that sucks the air out of your lungs, and Patty's face turned a shade of red that clashed with her white visor. But she didn't apologize. She didn't back down. She just narrowed her eyes and looked at me with pure hatred. After the meeting, an older woman named Mrs. Higgins, a retired librarian with sharp eyes and a cane, caught me in the parking lot, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "It's the bankruptcy," she whispered, looking over her shoulder as Patty's Mercedes peeled out of the lot. "She checks public records, Elias. She knows about the medical debt. She did the same thing to the Miller family 2 years ago, drove them out because she thinks debt is a disease that infects the neighborhood." That revelation hit me harder than any fine, because it meant this wasn't just about lawn care or trash cans. It was about Elena. It was about the fact that I had spent every dime I had trying to save my wife, and this woman, this hollow shell of a human being, was using my tragedy as a weapon against me. I went home that night and looked at Maya, sleeping soundly in a house I was fighting to keep, and I realized that playing defense wasn't going to work anymore. I had to go on the offensive, but I wasn't going to use violence. I was going to use physics, and I was going to use the law. The shift from victim to hunter changes a man. It replaces the anxiety in your gut with a cold, hard resolve. And the next morning, I didn't dread the day. I attacked it, starting with a trip to the Buncombe County Register of Deeds, because if Mrs. Higgins was right about Patty's history, then there had to be a paper trail. I spent my lunch breaks digging through dusty filings and digital archives, looking for anything that could explain how a woman like Patty held so much power, and what I found was a gaping hole where the HOA's legitimacy should have been. It turned out that Patty had never filed the annual financial reports required by North Carolina state law for the last 3 years, a clerical oversight that, according to the statutes I was reading, meant the HOA was technically administratively dissolved, a zombie organization walking around without a legal pulse. But the real smoking gun was the money, because when I started cross-referencing the fines she was collecting with the bank deposits, records I accessed through a sympathetic clerk who hated Patty's real estate firm. I saw a pattern of consulting fees being paid to a shell company registered to Patty's maiden name. She wasn't just a bully, she was a thief, embezzling thousands of dollars from her neighbors to fund her lifestyle, while driving vulnerable families out of their homes to snap up their properties cheap. While I was building the legal coffin, Patty was hammering nails into her own, escalating her harassment to a fever pitch, sending me a fine for unlicensed electrical work regarding a Christmas light outlet I had installed, an outlet that was perfectly legal, and getting her cousin in city code enforcement to issue me a citation. She was trying to bleed me dry, thinking I was just a dumb carpenter who would fold under the pressure of official-looking paper. But she forgot that electricians and carpenters understand structure. We understand that if the foundation is rotten, the whole house comes down. I connected with a local paralegal named Sarah Jenkins, a friend of a friend who had a nose for fraud, and we started building a RICO case, organizing a quiet resistance in the neighborhood, going door to door under the guise of a community satisfaction survey to find other victims. We found 8 other families, people like Mr. Henderson, a Vietnam vet on a fixed income who was paying off a bogus lien Patty had placed on his home, all of them terrified, all of them broke, all of them ready to fight back if someone would just lead the charge. But I needed one final piece of visual evidence, a moment so undeniable that it would shatter her concerned community leader persona forever. And that's when the concrete idea came to me, born from a joke on a job site where we were pouring a foundation for a skyscraper. "You know what stops a kick?" my foreman had laughed. "Massachusetts. Newton's third law states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. But Patty was about to learn that when you kick 320 pounds of cured quikrete, the reaction is entirely yours to keep. I spent Monday evening in Mrs. Higgins' garage, mixing the slurry with the focus of a bomb maker, the gray sludge swirling in the wheelbarrow, heavy and wet and unforgiving. I had bought a brand new trash can, identical to the one she loved to abuse, and I built a mold inside it, pouring the concrete until it was a solid, dense monolith that looked innocent on the outside but possessed the density of a dying star. I wheeled it to the curb at 10 p.m., the wheels groaning under the weight, positioning it exactly on the mark, a silent sentinel waiting for the dawn. I checked my cameras, all 6 of them now, covering every angle in 4K resolution, backing up to the cloud instantly, and I went to bed with the peaceful sleep of a man who knows justice is coming in the morning. Tuesday dawned clear and cold, the kind of morning where sound travels for miles, and I sat at my window with my coffee, my heart rate steady, watching the clock tick towards 6:47 a.m. She appeared on schedule, the pink tracksuit replaced by a baby blue ensemble, her breath puffing in the chill air, her stride confident, arrogant, the stride of a woman who believes she is the main character in everyone else's life. She passed the Gables house. She passed the Miller's old house. She approached my driveway. I leaned forward, my breath fogging the glass. She didn't hesitate. She didn't slow down. She saw the can and her face tightened into that familiar sneer, and she wound up, putting her full body weight into a kick that was meant to send a message, meant to assert dominance, meant to break me. Thud. It wasn't a hollow bang. It was a dense, sickening crunch, the sound of meat and bone meeting an immovable object. Patty stopped instantly, her momentum arrested so violently that she spun like a top, grabbing my mailbox to keep from collapsing, a sound escaping her throat that was halfway between a scream and a sob. She stood there on one leg, clutching her foot, staring at the trash can with profound confusion, as if the inanimate object had broken a sacred pact with her. And then, the rage took over. Instead of limping home, instead of accepting defeat, the humiliation short-circuited her brain. She hobbled back to her house and returned 20 minutes later, not with a bandage, but with a crowbar and a sledgehammer, her face a mask of sweaty, ruined makeup. It was glorious chaos. In full view of the school bus that was picking up kids, in front of neighbors walking their dogs, Patty Caldwell proceeded to assault my trash can with the fury of a berserker, the clang-clang-clang of metal on concrete echoing through Oakwood Enclave like a church bell from hell. She was screaming incoherent threats about illegal obstructions and traps, chipping away at the plastic to reveal the gray stone beneath, exposing her own insanity with every swing. I walked out onto my porch, laptop in hand, just as Officer Davids, a young cop who looked like he'd seen everything but this, pulled up in his cruiser, lights flashing. "Ma'am," he shouted, hand on his holster. "Drop the hammer." Patty spun around, wild-eyed, pointing the crowbar at me. "He booby-trapped the sidewalk. He's trying to kill me. Arrest him." I calmly walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots, and held up the screen showing 6 months of harassment. "Officer," I said, my voice calm, "Mrs. Caldwell has been kicking over my trash can for 24 weeks. I just made it harder to kick. Is there a law against heavy trash?" The thing about narcissists is that they never know when to fold. They always double down, convinced that they can bluff their way through physics and felonies. So Patty didn't just accept the vandalism charge Officer Davids wrote her. She sued me. She hired a shark of a lawyer from Raleigh, filing a civil suit demanding $50,000 for emotional distress, physical injury, and creating a public hazard. A move so audacious it would have been funny if it didn't involve the risk of me losing my home. The court date at the Buncombe County Courthouse was the hottest ticket in town. The courtroom packed with neighbors, reporters from the Asheville Citizen-Times, and even a local TV crew, because the video of the concrete Karen had gone viral, racking up millions of views and turning Patty into a national punchline. But inside that room, it wasn't a meme, it was war. Patty's lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling who wore a suit that cost more than my truck, painted a picture of me as a dangerous lunatic, a blue-collar brute trapping a delicate flower of the community. But Judge Moretti, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, didn't seem impressed by his theatrics. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, looking over her spectacles, "did you intend to injure the plaintiff?" I stood up, adjusting the cheap tie I had bought for the occasion. "Your Honor, I intended to keep my trash in the can." Mrs. Caldwell provided the velocity. I just provided the mass. A titter of laughter rippled through the courtroom, silenced by the judge's gavel. But the real blow came when Sarah Jenkins, my paralegal turned savior, stood up. "Your Honor, while the defense argues about concrete, we would like to submit a motion regarding the plaintiff's standing to sue. Given that the HOA she claims to represent has been legally dissolved for 3 years, and we have evidence suggesting the funds she is suing for are needed to cover up a massive embezzlement scheme." The air left the room. Patty's face went from smug to ghostly white in a heartbeat. We played the videos, not just the trash can, but the window peeping, the harassment of the Miller family, the fake liens. Then we showed the bank records, the $47,000 siphoned into her personal accounts. Patty snapped. She stood up, knocking her chair over, and screamed, "I did what was necessary. People like him, people with debt and cancer bills, they ruin the aesthetic. They bring down the value. I was protecting Oakwood Enclave from becoming a slum." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of her confession. She had said the quiet part out loud, admitting that her entire crusade, her entire existence as a neighborhood warlord, was fueled by a hatred of the vulnerable, a disgust for anyone who had suffered misfortune. Judge Moretti looked at Patty with an expression of pure disdain. "Mrs. Caldwell, you are a predator. Case dismissed with prejudice. And I am referring this entire file to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation into fraud and embezzlement." The ending wasn't a movie ending where the hero rides off into the sunset. It was better. Patty pleaded guilty to avoid a jury trial, receiving probation, massive restitution payments, and a permanent ban from serving on any board of directors in the state of North Carolina. Her house was sold to pay back the stolen money, bought by a young couple with twin boys who now use the concrete trash can, which still sits on my curb, as home base for their games of tag. We dissolved the fake HOA and started a voluntary neighborhood watch, using the recovered funds to build a playground named after Elena. My business exploded, the concrete contractor becoming a local legend, and I put every extra dime into a college fund for Maya, ensuring she would never start her life with the kind of debt that made us targets. But as I sit on my porch now, watching the leaves fall in Asheville, I wonder about the line between justice and revenge. I stopped a bully, yes, but I also destroyed a woman's life, stripping her of her home and her reputation. Did she deserve it? Absolutely. But it keeps me up at night, thinking about how easy it is for authority to rot, and how the only thing stopping a tyrant is often just one person willing to be an immovable object. Was I right to escalate it? Or did I just become a different kind of monster in the process? Tell me in the comments, because while the concrete has cured, the questions haven't.
Thanks so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, drop a comment telling me your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe, turn on the bell so you never miss the next one. See you in the next video.